All right, everybody, welcome to Virtual Bourbon. We've got a fun event tonight. We've got Wes Hardin, our Dusty Hunter, with a special event that we did for Father's Day. Of course, we didn't do it on actual Father's Day because we figured you guys are busy. You're barbecuing, you're having fun with friends and family. So we did it a couple days later, but it is going to be a fun event. We are trying 80 proof bourbons. We're going to try current ones versus some vintage ones. It's going to be our job to see if we can figure out what is what. So it should be good. With that, I'd like to turn it over to our host for this evening, Mr. Wes Hardin. Wes, take it away.
How's everyone doing?
We're good.
Good.
All right. So we got quite a lineup. We've got 5 different samples. We're going to have to do the hard work of sampling and tasting notes and kind of figuring out what's what. And along the way, we do have 2 Dusties in the group of 5. So there are 2 Dusty 80 proofs, and there's 3 items that you can get on your most bourbon liquor store shelves today. So I think what I want to do to kind of split everything up, I want to start off the bat and I want to go ahead and taste something. And then what we'll do is we'll taste I'll run through the history of one of the Dusties. We'll taste maybe a couple more, and then I'll do the history of the second Dusty, and then we'll finish off D and E, and then we'll conversate along the way. So just as a disclaimer, the drinking order is obviously random. The drinking order and the history have nothing to do with each other. So there's no trick or anything like that. So if everyone will grab bottle A is an apple.
Okay.
And I want to give a quick thanks to Miss Justine for making these really cool Father's Day stickers and to saving my sanity of trying to label these anything less than that. So
we get super creative with these. So
yeah, she's very good with that. So thank you, Justine. All right. So, and we will not divulge, like we always do, we will not divulge what is what until the end. So everyone's guess is whatever they want it to be, but whenever anyone's ready to give their opinion on what the nose is, what they've got.
Well, so I'll start it out even before we talk nose.
Okay.
and taste and all that. Color. The color on this one is just great, man.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Dark. It's amber, dark, deep amber, I'd say. I mean, it's really good. As you're checking that color, you can see the legs this one has on it too. They hold pretty good. I mean, so just early on, I'm thinking this is going to be a decent pick here, but we'll see.
Yeah, on the nose, I get some stone fruit, kind of like cherry, apricot, peach, something of that. It's not really citrusy, and it's not like super sweet, but it's like that kind of hearty, just juicy stone fruit is what I get.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty predominant, actually. I get a little bit when I go back in for the second time. I do get some of the caramel, and I get a little bit of like a baking spice too, like not really cinnamon, but just kind of like a baking spice, a little bit of a doughy smell.
I get kind of a caramel roll type of.
Yeah.
So I get the caramel and kind of the baked goods. So kind of a caramel roll.
Some brown sugar.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the light brown.
Yeah. That's probably what I was thinking of, Justine. I was trying to think of it's not really a spice, but it's like a hearty baking element.
Yeah.
Legend, what do you think there?
Well, I pick up the caramel.
Mm-hmm.
Caramel?
Brown sugar.
Anyone had a sip of it? Have any opinions?
Yeah, it's good.
It flavor's a lot lighter than I thought it was going to be. As dark it is,
Mm-hmm.
It's not super heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where that 80 proof obviously comes into play. It's not and we may be surprised. We may run into something tonight that challenges that, but most of the 80 proofs by design are kind of your low proof. I like a good 80 proof. I think it's a nice change to barrel strength. Just pounding your palate with just heat and proof all the time is probably not a good idea. I always promote drinking within the proof ranges. So yeah, this one to me is probably, I think it drinks a little over 80 personally. It's definitely, it drinks to me more like a 86.
Mm-hmm. There is some warmth that sticks with you a little bit. I'll say
Yeah, just
that.
a little bit.
Yeah. It's not hot by any means, but
No.
a little glow to it. So
Kent Mace, you're laid back, all chill there. What do you think?
I love the finish on it. It's a nice
Okay.
long finish. Yeah, I agree with you. The 80 proof, to me, usually 80 proof, I get a lot more flavors. I don't get just a whole lot of different flavors with this. When you said stone fruit, what would come into my mind, I was smelling kind of a lime mineral
Okay.
smell to it, but taste is good. It's just not very overwhelming.
Nope.
yeah.
I would agree. Anybody else have any notes on this one? If not, I'm going to go and jump into the first part of the bourbon history. As you're enjoying that, as I'm talking, if you guys decide to jump in afterwards before we get into B and C, then just jump in and let me know. But so one of the Dusties we have in this collection is a 1977 Sunnybrook 4-year. So it's obviously 4-year 80 proof. And it's a brand called Sunnybrook. It's a really old brand, actually. It was started in 1891, and it's a brand that came out of the old Stony Brook Distillery Company. The company was started by the Rosenfeld brothers, Morris, Lewis, and Joseph, and they were initially sourcers or rectifiers. So they were purchasing whiskey from 2 different Louisville facilities. And then they were obviously by the barrel then, not so much bottle, but they were relabeling and promoting it as their old Sunnybrook brand. They started to get a pretty good following sales wise. So they just decided to buy the distilleries. What's odd about this, and I had to check this out, but evidently the distilleries were actually 2 distilleries under the same roof, which is very strange. But one was the Sunnybrook and the other was the Willow Creek Distillery, which I had never heard of. So it was kind of interesting to pull that out. They were in Louisville down at 28th and Broadway. So like a lot of distilleries back in the 1800s and pre-prohibition time frame, you have the famed Whiskey Row and a lot of distilleries downtown in the west end of Louisville. And this was down there as well. Pretty much all their offerings were at 80 proof. So that was kind of cool to come up with. That distillery remained open from 1891 until 1975.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. I was really shocked to hear that because a lot of times, especially with brands like Sunnybrook, where there's not currently a label on the market, at least not that I've seen that I know of. Typically what happens with those, especially after Prohibition, is they would have changed hands from United Distillers to Diageo to Brown Forman and sold off here and there, and they end up somewhere or nowhere, or they're abandoned or whatnot. But these guys lasted from 1891 to 1975. In 1975, the distillery was shut down. That was obviously the right in the middle of bourbon and whiskey glut and the movement to white spirits. And then not long after it was shut down, the distillery was razed and it's no longer around, obviously. Key piece of information, at least for Steve anyway, Old Sunnybrook whiskey won the grand prize at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So a little bit of St. Louis
St. Louis
information.
connection. Yeah.
St.
Cool.
Louis connection.
I love the St. Louis connection.
I know you do. I put it in there specifically for you, just because I knew you would. I knew you'd like that. It just to kind of give a scale on how popular this brand was, and I didn't know it till I started going down this rabbit hole. In 1913, which is a long time ago, and they weren't making. There were a lot of distilleries, but there weren't a lot of distilleries that were big scale. These guys shipped an estimated 840,000 bottles of their labels in 1913. That's a pretty big SKU back then.
Yeah.
And then back then they had actually had added a couple of labels, and I never heard of any of these. Gladstone, Kentucky Comfort, which obviously we know about Southern Comfort, which is what it is. But Southern Comfort, but Kentucky Comfort, I never heard that. And Sunbeam, those are prototypical names you see on a lot of those legacy labels. It's like someone looks outside their window out on the farm and sees a birch tree and says, "Oh, we're going to call our bourbon birch tree." And they see a three-legged dog and they call it three-legged dog. And there's all these stories. But anyway, they had on top of Sunnybrook, they had those three labels as well. Kind of to go back a little bit, the distillery stayed open until 1975, but the brothers got hit hard at Prohibition. And they went bankrupt in 1917. At the end of Prohibition, National Distillers bought it and they kept it up until 1975. And they were only producing post-Prohibition the Sunnybrook label. So they discontinued those other three labels after Prohibition. Once
National Distillers was a monster, weren't they?
They
came out of Prohibition with everything.
They just, and more of these events and studies and history I do when I see these labels and I see these bottles, like they're a big player in the, I own this label and sold it to so-and-so or did whatever. Back in the day, they were a big time player, but they were a big time player right after Prohibition, but they were also a big time player when the whiskey glut in the late 60s, but really 70s and 80s happened. They bought a bunch of stuff and then they sold it off real quick. A lot of it went to Jim Beam and some others went to Heaven Hill. But yeah, they're all over the map in the 1900s for acquiring distilleries and more specifically whiskey brands. Yeah, more so than distilleries.
Yeah, their history is they kind of got everyone together, all these small brands at Prohibition, and unified them to allow them to sell medicinal whiskey. So it's like, okay, if you had a small brand, if you were the Neely Family Distillery of the day or whatever distillery you want, you're like, okay, I'm out of business. I can go with this group, this National Distillers group, and we can partner up, and then I can sell my inventory. I've got a means now to move my inventory and stay in business. So
absolutely,
that's what they did. That's why they collectively had so many brands. And afterwards, the thought was that they'd all, if Prohibition would ever end or anything like, they'd all break up and go back to. But no one had the infrastructure anymore. They sold off their equipment and all that, and it just became this unified Louisville company. So yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, it was. So it's kind of a weird scenario. They were so consistent. Their story's actually fairly short, to be honest with you. I mean, their biggest scenarios were the brothers went bankrupt and had to sell to United Distillers. United Distillers kept the distillery, kept the label, and out of that distillery came Sunnybrook, and that happened until 1975. And the plant, as we said before, the plant and the warehouses closed and were razed. But in 1987, just like we talked about it a minute ago, Jim Beam owns this brand.
Really?
They bought it in 1987 from National Distillers, pretty close to the time they bought O'Grandad, O'Taylor, those really high level and very popular brands that they purchased. One of the other brands that was included in that under the National Distillers portfolio was Sunnybrook. So it'd be interesting the next time we get a chance to talk to Fred or Freddie to see kind of, do they still own it? What's it doing? Do they have any plans for it?
Because you have to use it. So sometimes you'll see companies do like weird, very small releases to across the seas. They'll do an Asian release of, I don't know that it's been done with Sunnybrook, but a product like that, and be like, okay, yeah, we're still using the trademark and try to keep it up to date. They'll do these very weird small releases for and I don't know if they've ever done that. I don't know.
I don't remember seeing one. All the bottles I've ever seen of Sunnybrook, I don't remember seeing anything past late 70s, early 80s. The idea would be if the distillery's closed in 75, they still have whiskey that's aging, and whatever was distilled in 75 at the minimum probably is bottled at 79. But back then they weren't selling, and there was probably some that was 4 years stated, but was probably 6 to 8 years. So, but you don't see any bottles past the early 80s, which makes sense based on the timeline.
Yeah.
But yeah, it would be interesting. And it's kind of like, that's very similar to copyright laws, where if you don't sue someone periodically,
Right.
to protect your copyright and your trademarks, it's hard to keep them. You almost have to like pick a fight with someone just to say, yep, it's important to me, and
I'm protecting it. Yeah.
I'm protecting it, and I'm formulating a legal document to show you that I'm protecting it. So very similar with labels as well.
Again, we don't know what Sunnybrook here is between A and E, but what year is this from?
77.
77. Okay.
Yep, 77. It will be the oldest thing we drink tonight. Whenever we drink it.
Hey,
Okay.
Wes,
Yes, sir.
where was the distillery at?
And on 28th is basically downtown towards the west end of Louisville. So closer to where, kind of in between where the new Mictors and like Shively are, where Brown Foreman and the early times distillery and Sitza-Weller, that side of town.
So it wasn't on Glen Creek. So the Glenstone jumped out at me. So
No, it was not on Glen Creek. Yeah, a lot of the other national distillers, labels, Old Crow, Old Taylor, obviously, a lot of those the national distiller bought those distilleries at one time and owned those labels, and they sold all of those off along with some Louisville items. There were some Owensboro distillery labels that they sold off at the same time to both Sazerac now, but Barton back in the day, as well as Jim Beam. But no, this distillery was and has always been downtown Louisville, and it lasted for a really long time, actually a lot longer than I thought I was going to read about. I figured it was going to be one of those scenarios where it was alive for 20 years and shut down after Prohibition and was shit canned and someone passed a label around, but it's actually the opposite of that. It was a pretty stable product and stable distillery. Just had ownership change one time, and then when Clear Spirits hit everyone, it ended up at Beam with a lot of other things. So
Yeah.
pretty interesting, actually.
Yeah.
Anyone
All
have
right,
any
sir.
questions or comments about the history or A before we go on to sample B? All right, enough about me talking. Let's go to sample B as in boy.
Okay.
And looking for open feedback, opinions. Totally different nose.
Yeah. Florally on this one.
Yeah, I'm getting like a kind of a butterscotch too.
So who said licorice? I get a little of that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, I get a little bit of that licorice. I get like a heavy dose of butterscotch though.
Mm-hmm.
The first time, the second time, it's almost like if you were to make some abomination of a piece of candy that was half licorice and half butterscotch. You have to be over 70 to eat it though. What is this nose? Seems interesting. I'm wondering what everyone else gets on this nose.
I get the licorice, but I also get, don't laugh. I when I smelled it, I smelled pine sol. So maybe
Pine sol.
I poison yours, Ken. Happy Father's Day.
Pine sol. That's that. They definitely don't want that, but there's.
Yeah, whichever one of your kids is highest on the pecking order on the will, sent me a note, and I specially made your vials.
that would be lawyer Robert something.
Yeah. Wait till you get to C and D. I'll expect rat poison and cyanide.
Cyanide. Okay, that's the nightcap.
Yeah, that's the nightcap.
That's why I got mine so much earlier than everybody else.
That's why. Yeah.
I delivered in a hazmat suit.
Yeah, there's a time limit on my contract here. I've got to perform here and go through with it.
All right, let's give it a taste.
A little spicier than the first one to me.
Different tasting than on the nose.
Yep, I agree.
Tastes like peanut brittle.
Peanut brittle.
It's definitely sweet.
While you guys are tasting and nosing, I failed to comment on what all the 5 samples were in no particular order. So tonight we definitely know we are going to drink the 77 Sunnybrook. Okay. The other Dusty is an early 2000s Old Charter 7-year. The three modern day or current offerings are just your Jim Beam white label 80 proof, Four Roses former yellow now tan label 80 proof, and our good buddy Basil Hayden, which is always
Diesel Hayden. Oh yeah.
Yep. So those are the five. I forgot to mention that. I apologize.
Okay.
That way, if you want to start writing down or putting your opinions on what you think each item is as we go through them.
Okay.
What does everyone think of this one?
It's got a different mouthfeel. Like way not as thick a mouthfeel as the first one.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
It's formed different places too. The first one was I got it more in the top of my mouth. This one's all the bottom of my mouth.
Okay.
Jay, what are you thinking as you're trying this one?
Can't decide if it tastes sweet or not. Okay.
Uh-huh.
I definitely got that in the nose, and I feel like I'm getting that when I sip, but then sort of, as Blake said, I'm getting like a bloom in the bottom front of my mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Like saying hello.
Is just curious as we're going along, is there anyone who thinks they've tasted anything that they recognize? Just curious.
Pine Sol doesn't count, right?
Depends on how much Pine Sol you've had.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I'll reserve judgment till the end. Yes, I want to go through
Okay.
these.
Is everyone ready to go to sample C?
Yep.
Do we have any more feedback on B?
Okay.
All right. Let's
Move to C.
progress to C.
Okay.
Okay.
This one's interesting too. Sharper.
Sharper. Okay. This one seems to have a little bit darker color than the B.
Mm-hmm.
B was a little lighter color, I thought. Yeah, I would agree. Sharper is on the nose. It's got a. It's hard to pinpoint what that is.
Yeah, it just jumps out of that glass though.
Wow.
I'm a little like a little minty.
I agree.
Mint. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll always like nosing, taking one small sip. I feel like after you take a sip, it actually opens up your nasal cavity a little bit and kind of then go back and nose a second time and a third. And that's when I typically pull out more of the nuance kind of things in there. When I go back in, I get exactly what Justine's talking about on the mint.
Mm-hmm.
But then I get like, and which makes sense, I get like almost like a lemon lime, kind of like a fruity citrus with that mint. And I get a little bit of almost like a bubble gum sweetness, almost like if you were chewing like the old school gum that came in the baseball cards that really dry, but when you chew it, it's got that super sugary sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or cotton candy, maybe something in that realm, that confectioner's sugar.
I'm going creme brulee on the taste though. Different.
Taste is totally different.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? Legend, you alive there?
Yeah, barely. I'd say some caramelized sugar.
Okay. That makes the creme brulee sound correct.
Yeah. Yeah. That goes in hand with that. Nate, how about you, man? Are you getting Anything on the taste or nose that's unique here?
Can't quite figure it out. That's what I'm sitting here trying to. I feel like there's something familiar about it, but I'm having a hard time placing it. If I figure it out, I'll let you know. But
Okay.
Yeah, there's something I can't pick up on the palate either.
All right, Jay, can you help us out with this one? Jay, anything you want to add to this one?
it might just be. I mean, this seems like this is probably one of the Dusties, and maybe that's just kind of the vibe I'm picking. Whatever flavor that is, that just kind of goes with
The Dusty,
the
that old Dusty Funk, is that
That
what
old funk,
Yeah, Funk, Dusty Funk,
the old dusty funk,
could be.
very prominent in wild turkey Dusties.
Yeah.
They're kind
I'm
of
not good at like describing this, but this one tastes pointier.
Mm-hmm.
okay.
It's almost like, for me, I almost feel like it's got a roof of the mouth, kind of a Scotch.
Like a smokiness.
Yeah, like a
Okay.
peatiness.
Okay. For the record, this one was described as both sharper and pointier. So this is not normal tasting notes. I don't know why we're coming up with these. This is definitely unique.
I like it.
Yeah. Start doing adjectives that have nothing to do with the taste. It's cool.
Sharper and pointy. I like it.
This seems more like freedom to me. You know,
Freedom.
Yeah,
I like
freedom.
it.
Very
like
honest.
Jagged freedom, I'd say. That's
Jagged.
how I describe this one.
If it was a single barrel, that's what we call it. Jagged freedom. Oh.
That one's good though, Wes. I like that.
Yeah, I
do
thought it
like
was
that.
good, too.
Whatever it is.
I thought
I
it
do
was
like
good. All right, you guys want to hear some more bourbon history?
Yeah.
Finish up your ABC samples if you choose. All right, so the second piece of bourbon history is going to be the other Dusty offering in the lineup. This is an early 2000s Old Charter 7-year. I say early 2000s because it's hard to pinpoint from the markings on the bottle and the label exactly what year it is, but knowledge of Old Charter and UPC code and some other items, it's going to be somewhere between 2000 and probably 2003 or 4 timeframe. Old Charter's it's a legacy brand for sure. It's been around for quite a long time, 1867 to be specific. So it was started by Adam and Ben Chappies. I think that's how you pronounce their name. And they built a distillery in a little town, ironically called Chappies, Kentucky. But if you map it out, it's basically Bardstown. So it's like a suburb of Bardstown. Kentucky, especially in the more rural areas, have always had this thing where inside of a town, there's like a little bitty subset over by a river or something, and someone decided to call it. Doesn't have a post office, it doesn't have a postal code, it's just a neighborhood. And a lot of those, because they were named after distillers and people who started distilleries, they ended up creating their own little quote unquote town, or at least they took credit for having a town named after them. So there you see a lot of that in this Dusty history. But yeah, so it started in 1867 by the Chappies brothers in Chappies, Kentucky, aka Bardstown. So they created the brand in 1874. They named the brand after the charter oak tree in the courtyard of Hartford, Connecticut, which I did not know that. Didn't know that there was such a thing called the charter oak tree, but if you Google it, there's a little history of a charter oak tree in the courtyard of Hartford, Connecticut. So that's
It's on the back of the Connecticut quarter, right? The charter.
it probably is. Yeah, it probably is. I never knew that, but it probably is. Interesting note that 1874 was the same year that the Kentucky Derby was first ran at Churchill Downs. Just a little piece of information I came across. In 1890, the firm of Wright and Taylor purchased a distillery from two gentlemen with the last names Lamont and Moore, who had just purchased from the Chappies brothers. So like within a handful of months, the brothers sold out to one group. For whatever reason, these guys turned it around and sold it to Wright and Taylor. In 1894, Wright and Taylor moved their office, not the distillery, but they moved their office to Whiskey Row in Louisville. And in 1896, they started enlarging and expanding the distillery in Chappies to a mashing capacity of 1,000 bushels per day. And at the same time, they actually had, and I've never seen this before, but there was a product at one time, pre-prohibition. They did a rye. It was Old Charter rye. I had no idea that it ever existed. I've never seen a bottle in any. I've never seen one that I remember at the Getz Museum or Justin's House of Bourbon or any of those places like that. So I'm sure if there's any lying around, they're an extremely pretty penny to pick one of those up. But they existed at one time pre-prohibition. In 1905, Old Carter was distributed across the entire U.S., including Alaska, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And it was valued in Midas Criteria, which at the time was kind of like a business publication that gave you the values of businesses and so forth. And it was at that time in 1905, it was valued at $750,000. I would guess today, I would hate to guess even what that is, but it's a large chunk of money. $750,000 in 1905 is a pretty large sum of money. At the end of Prohibition, the company was sold off to two businessmen from Chicago who also had purchased the Bernheim distillery. And in the Bernheim distillery, they produced I.W. Harper, Belmont, which I've heard, Astor, which I've heard of Astor, A-S-T-O-R, and Old Charter. So they were at one time producing Old Charter at the Chappies distillery as well as at the Bernheim distillery in Louisville, which is interesting. In 1937, they sold to Schenley. Schenley was one of the big five post-prohibition who swooped in and bought up all of these distilleries, all these labels, and kind of those five kind of had a chokehold and a monopoly on the market at that time. And so Schenley purchased the Old Charter label as well as the distillery in Chappies, and they changed the name of that distillery in Chappies to the Limestone Springs Distillery. So from then, they didn't produce Old Charter under that label at that distillery anymore, but they still produced it in Louisville out of Bernheim under the Old Charter label. They had also purchased the GT Stag distillery, and once they purchased the GT Stag, for a time they also produced Old Charter out of what's now Buffalo Trace, which was the George T. Stagg distillery. So the Old Charter brand was actually at one time produced out of three different distilleries, one in Frankfort, one in Bardstown, and one in Louisville. And it was a super popular brand. Until 1958, Schenley had been selling Old Charter under age statements of 8-year, but in 1958, they convinced the government to increase the bonding period for whiskey from 8 to 20 years. And once they did that, they came out with a 10 and a 12-year-old version. And those were really popular. And I have seen quite a few 10-year-old age stated, and I've seen quite a few 12-year-old age stated Old Charters. So they've produced those from 1958 all the way into the 70s and 80s for sure. To promote their older whiskey, they actually created a collection of clocks that toured the country promoting the Old Charter brand. And some of those clocks are over 100 years old. So now that piece of information is in here and it makes sense. If you've ever seen a dusty bottle of Old Charter and looked at the front label, there's a clock on the label.
Huh.
Yep. And the reason it's on there is their slogan from way back in the early days was that Old Charter whiskey was a whiskey that, quote unquote, did not watch the clock. So basically, we're going to do it the old fashioned way. We don't have a time frame when we're going to dump our whiskey when the quality's there and the flavor's there. We don't care how long it takes. You're getting the best whiskey possible. And to promote that in their labeling, they put that clock on the front of their label. And then to further promote it, they went on this tour. They acquired all these antique clocks and went around and did like a traveling whiskey clock roadshow, evidently, across the U.S.
Imagine being on that roadshow. Yeah.
Oh, I know. That'd be the
Clocks.
greatest job ever.
Yeah. Yeah. Daylight savings comes, your life is just screwed. It's a very stressful time.
Yep. So from 58 to 87, Shenley just was pumping out these 8, 10, 12-year offerings of Old Charter and doing their clock tour. In 87, our old buddies, United Distillers, come back into the picture for another Dusty label. And Old Charter was sold to United Distillers. And they introduced the 13-year Old Charter Proprietors Reserve. They did that in 1994, and it was part of the Bourbon Heritage Collection. So I don't know if anyone remembers these. They were all in Elmer T. Lee bottles. And there was an I.W. Harper. So this makes sense because United Distillers purchased the distilleries and these brands at that time frame. And we just talked about I.W. Harper was made in the same distillery as Old Charter and a couple of others. And so before there was a BTAC collection and before there was the Pappy Van Winkle lineup, there was a Bourbon Heritage collection of 5 different bourbons. If you look it up and Google it, I can't remember every one of them, but there was the 13-year Old Charter. There was a Dickel, believe it or not. There was a Dickel as part of that. Yeah, it was kind of strange. There was the I.W. Harper. Oh, I can't remember the other 2 off the top of my head. Oh, one was a Weller, a William LaRue Weller, was part of that collection in an Elmer T. Lee style bottle. And I think there may have been I don't know if it was Stag or who the 5th one was. I'll have to look it up. I should have looked that up. Anyway, it was part of this kind of the original BTAC collection, for lack of better terms. And obviously it's changed once labels and so forth changed later. But it was just interesting that Old Charter was thought so well of at one time that they put that 13-year in that Bourbon Heritage collection that was right there with I.W. Harper, which was in the prime of I.W. Harper and some of the others, and William LaRue Weller, Dickel. I'm not sure why Dickel made it in there, but so be it. And who knows? Back then, it may have been amazing. It may not have tasted like Flintstone vitamins, but today it tastes like
that was their
vitamins.
marketing. We do not taste like Flintstone vitamins.
Yeah, that's right.
Yet, and then in
Yet.
parentheses it said yet.
Yet.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. It was a really well thought of brand. They had.
We need to do an article on that, right? I mean, we need to
probably so. I need to do a little
the
more
original
digging.
BTAC collection.
Yeah,
which I can't believe more companies haven't copied the BTAC idea. Again, not that they would call it BTAC because that's Buffalo Trace Antique Collection, but that concept, 5 whiskeys from Beam that you could pick out. This is a 17-year-old Basil Hayden's. This is, they could do all these crazy different things.
Absolutely. Yeah, Beam is probably the one that has a wide enough set of mash bills and a wide enough portfolio.
Brown-Forman could probably do something too.
Brown-Forman could. They would have to.
It'd be just a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah, they would have to go outside their comfort zone and let some product age a little longer, I think, because I don't think you can do one of those collections with 5 or 6-year-old whiskey like people want. If they're gonna, people want to see, for instance, a 17-year Eagle Rare, or they want to see a 13-year Stag, or whatever the case is. So they could do it. They have to set aside some stock, but even Wild Turkey could do it. I mean, Wild Turkey's portfolio, as far as the different offerings, is much less diverse than it was 60s, 70s, 80s. I mean, they had all those different versions. They had Tribute, and they had the one they called the Gold Foil, and they had all these different age statements, and they had the what they called the Christmas Rye, the well-aged rye. So I think Wild Turkey probably has the stock in the. And
they've got the older stock too. They've
got the older stock, and they've got the flexibility labeling and branding where they could come up with a wild, some clever term for a Wild Turkey collection of some sort and go from there. But I'm like you, Steve. I think that's something that's probably Beam for sure is the first one that needs to do that. They've got the wherewithal to do that.
Yeah, imagine a cool version of Old Grandad and Old Crow. There's different things they could do with those heritage labels that would just be an awesome.
Or
collection.
even if they mix some of the some better well-aged stock in relation to Old Crow and Old Grandad, along with maybe a couple, bring back a Sunnybrook for a special label, or bring back
Right.
one of these, Freddie even admitted on our event with the Bookers that they own a bunch of labels that no one even knows about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or something like that. So yeah, I think that's something that would be pretty cool. But yeah, I'll do an article on that heritage collection. That's a pretty good idea.
That would be cool to see what exactly was in there and how it,
Yep.
how it kind of probably set the stage for what is now the BTAC collection. And why others don't jump on it is a mystery to me.
Absolutely. So finish off the Old Charter history. In 1997, the Old Charter brand was sold to Buffalo Trace. And since then, they basically have ceased producing and bottling Old Charter with well-aged offerings with age statements. So probably, I don't know, it's probably 8 or 9 years ago, maybe 10. They dropped the last age statement they had was the 8-year. They dropped it. They cleverly left just the number 8 on the label.
Yes. Yeah.
And they got away with that for a while, but
For a while,
but here in the last couple of years, someone took them to task in court, and they were forced, I guess the TTB or a court or someone forced them to add the number like NO period 8. So now it's there is Old Charter today. It's the quote unquote old number 8. I think most people, it's an 80 proof. Most people believe it's somewhere in the 3-year range. It's not well aged at all, and it's basically considered a bottom shelf mixture.
Bottom shelfer.
One other piece of interesting information. Sometime in the 90s and early 2000s, they had a really short-lived, but I had a bottle of this, and you can still find them. You maybe will find them. The last one I found was a couple of years ago in a really old beat-up store on the bottom shelf, but it's in like a brown bottle. It's called Old Charter 101. So they had 101 proof, not age stated, but they had a 101 proof that was really good. And I don't know, I think that was right when Buffalo Trace took them over. So they must have had some special bottling or something. They don't make it anymore, but it was an Old Charter 101 proof.
Charter 101. I thought I had one here, but I do not.
Yeah, I've had a bottle. It's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
It's got a little more proof points to it. It's not age stated. You can still tell it doesn't have a ton of age, but it's definitely not a 3-year, and it's definitely not 80 proof. So, so that's the history of Old Charter brand, and pretty historic brand actually. Been around for a while, well respected. I've had some 86, 90 proof, 8, 9, 10-year age stated Old Charter that's pretty dang tasty actually. So
yeah, you may wonder, just for the audience here, you may wonder why a well-respected brand like Old Charter, why would you as a company leave that to the bottom shelf? Why would you do that with Old Crow, one of the best known names of bourbon? Yeah, but these companies, I think they do that for a very specific reason. And the reason for that is they have to do something with large volume of a little bit off profile whiskey. And it's almost like having, if you're in the clothing business, you sell to stores like Marshall's and that then take your excess inventory. You can sell off some in some way, but you're making pennies on the dollar, or you can have a brand yourself, and you can have a bottom shelf brand where you retain more of that revenue. And I think they like having these well-known names, something that they don't have to invest any money in advertising. They don't have to promote. They don't have to teach you. When Beam was like, we're going to make this a bottom shelf bourbon and use it for off profile stuff, or Sazerac did it with Old Charter. They don't have to educate the consumers on what it is. They don't have to spend advertising. People know what it is, and they may have remembered their grandfather drinking it or something like that, and it's enough to get them to pick up that bottle. So they like the fact that there's a known entity that they can move some inventory with. So
that's the exact reason they do it. And on the flip side, outside of the whiskey nerd community, myself and most people that we interact
that do these type of events.
Most people outside of the whiskey enthusiast community, if Beam decides to do something, for instance, with Old Crow, other than a handful of people that are really into Dusties and that have drank Old Crow Dusty and understand how good it can be and how good it is, even if they came out with a 10-year age stated Old Crow for a special collection or something, the general public's probably not going to buy into it because they just know it for their whole life is, bottom shelf mixer and what my granddad drinks. So part of the problem with doing what we just talked about is you also kind of, if you undervalue it for so long as a bottom shelf, low proof, small age, no age statement, but young whiskey, if you decide, if we get into a scenario in the next few years where we've got the beginnings of a whiskey excess, and they need to start moving some well-aged whiskey, and one of the better ways to do it is to introduce a special edition of this and a special edition of that. The whiskey community, as far as the enthusiasts, are going to pick up on it and be smart enough to know what it is. But if they make it in any kind of mass quantity, they may have a hard time getting rid of it because people associate it with bottom shelf rot gut, in air quotations, kind of thing. So,
yeah.
All right, you ready for sample D as in dog?
Let's try D. As in delightful, but hopefully not
as in
dog.
delightful.
Yeah, not dog. We'll see.
I think dogs are delightful, so I'm good with that. Very different nose than what I've had so far tonight.
Yeah.
Very floral to me.
Floral.
Floral with a little bit of like cherry cough syrup, not in a medicinal way, but like that. What's that one cherry cough drop that's like
Ludens.
Ludens, yes, sir. Thank you.
The old Ludens.
The old Ludens, otherwise known as cherry candy.
Exactly. Your mom telling you it's medicine. Quit eating so many of those. That's medicine. So good.
They were good.
Yeah.
Much better than Sucrets.
Oh yeah. Halls with their mentholyptus.
With their mentholyptus.
Old person cough drop.
It's got nice legs in the glass.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, I go back in, I get a really distinct smell, and I can't pick up on what it is.
Anybody got anything there? Help Wes out with that nose he's getting.
It reminds me of like something my mom and grandma would use in the kitchen while they were preparing like baking or a meal or something. And I cannot pick out what it is.
Yeah. I'm getting
like a vanilla wafer, kind of.
vanilla wafer.
I still get that sweet cherry. Almost like a maraschino. Now that I'm getting into it, it's more like a maraschino cherry.
Yeah. I get on the taste, it's a little spice to this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of maybe cinnamon cake.
Yeah. It's not like a peppery spice.
Right.
To me, it's like you said, it's more of like a sweet spice, if that makes any sense, like something in a baked good or in a sugar confection or something like that.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm getting some sort of nuttiness to it.
Okay.
Nuttiness. Okay. Yeah.
Fruitcake.
Fruitcake.
Okay.
Probably makes a lot of sense. That would probably explain why it took me back to like my grandma, because she always made fruit cakes at Christmas from scratch for some unknown reason.
I don't know if you guys are keeping track of this. I am. I'm writing notes here. I think I know what E's going to be, because I think I got the other four down. We'll see.
Wow.
We might have to send in. Maybe we'll do like message to you, Wes, what we think, so people can't hear anybody else's what they're voting on, and then we'll see if anybody gets it right.
You want to do can you do like in the chat? Can you do like
in the chat? Yeah, you can send a direct message.
Oh, I see it.
So,
okay.
Yeah. So we'll do that when we get done. Obviously, we got one more to get through.
Okay. Anybody else have any notes on this one here? Anyone like it better than the others, worse than the others?
I think it's pretty solid. I mean, this would be one that you could sip.
Yeah, I like it.
Nothing wrong with this one. So,
right, let's move on to E for Edward.
right.
is really light in the glass.
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
That's hay colored. It is. I mean,
It is hay colored.
it's hay colored. I mean, on the nose, it's pretty light on the nose.
It is. I had to stick my schnoz down in there.
Yeah.
Of course, then all I get's alcohol. But
Yeah. Then you get the burn. But
I would say if there's anything that I get on the nose, I get a hint of like maybe like not as rich as peanut butter, but maybe like, I don't know, peanut brittle or like a peanut candy or something like
peanut
that.
candy.
What are those little things, those Zag nuts or whatever? Is it what those are, peanut based? I can't remember. There's like a little peanut weird looking candy I used to get as a kid at Halloween. I always threw them out.
It
I didn't
kind of
like 'em.
it kind of looked a little like it should be brittle, but it broke real easy.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
like
yeah,
brittle
yeah.
looks-
It was like had stripes on it. It was kind
Yeah,
of hollow
yeah,
in the middle. Yeah, that
yeah.
guy. Whatever that thing was is what I'm getting.
Roll this one a lot. If you get a bunch of oxygen in it, it brings out a lot more flavor to me anyway.
Yeah, I will say that I get more flavor on the palate by far than I get out of the nose.
Yeah, on the palate, there's some things going on there.
The palate to me has I get a little bit of corn, kind of like a sweet corn. And I get a little bit of that earthy, almost like when I get earthy, it either goes vegetative, which this isn't to me, or it goes down like leather, tobacco, that kind of like earthiness. That's where this one goes for me. Anyone else?
A little grainy, a little oaty to me.
Yeah, definitely grain forward. All right.
Like very polite, this one.
Very polite. I like
It's
that.
polite.
All right.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm going to grade.
Type of one that you bring home to your parents, you know.
Yeah. You can bring this one home to mom and dad. we need to write a book. We get together and just do these kind of notes.
Yeah,
get very in
absolutely.
depth, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like on the nose you get grandpa's buttermilk or something like that. It's perfect. All right, Steve has his votes in privately. I won't give them out, but I've got those. I'm keeping score.
What you want to do is, of course, there's three brands we know and we've probably all tasted if we're really into bourbon: Jim Beam, Four Roses, and Basil Hayden's. The other ones we don't expect you to know what they taste like because you probably haven't tried them. I've drank a lot of bourbon. I've tried. Obviously I've tried Old Charter, and I've even tried some older stuff. But again, it's going to vary by year. And then the other one, most of us probably haven't tried at all. So I just did mine. I did Dusties, so I listed a Dusty, and then I listed the brand names. So just trying to guess if I think I can get them right. So
Yeah, without naming the name. So what Steve did is he did A, B, C, D, E, and out to the right, he just typed in either Dusty or what the three current brands are beside which ones he thought was which.
I thought was which, yeah.
All right, perfect. So Steve's in. The votes are in.
I've locked mine in. I cannot change it now, even if I wanted to.
Yes. It's
Once you
official.
vote, it is final.
We'll have a third party review this afterwards.
Tally the votes for us.
8 Mace is almost in. He's got 3 of the 5.
Blake sent it to me, but if you could send it to Wes.
Oh, okay.
All right, maybe I can copy this for Blake.
Interesting.
That's Wes. I just sent you. That's Blake's. So I assume
Right.
the other two would be Dusty because he didn't list the other two.
Okay, we can do it that way. That's no problem.
So
Kent Mace. What are you doing there, Kent?
Sorry,
Kent probably just said all the same thing, and then he said Dusty all 5. That way he
This is-
got
this
he gets
is-
at least 2 right.
Because Kent's a good sport, and this is funny. This is what he sent me. He sent A. Sunnybrook, Dusty in parentheses, EBD. Oh man. All right, I got Nate's. Nate is in the books.
Okay.
We have who did you send, Steve?
That's Blake. So the other
That's
2,
Blake, okay.
yeah, the
Okay.
other 2 not
Okay.
listed there would be Dusty, and then
Okay, gotcha.
he's
So
got those
he thinks-
specific.
Okay. All right, gotcha.
Is.
All righty. Got some consistencies, and we got some other areas that are kind of out there. So
This is kind of fun. It's a quiz.
it is fun. I like it.
Yeah.
It's a quiz. So yeah, it's like homework. You didn't think you're going to be signing on this is Father's Day homework here, folks.
Father's Day homework. That's what I like.
Yeah. How did you do on your assignment?
All right. Do we lose Justine?
No, Justine's there. I see her.
Oh, there she is.
She's not froze or anything. She's
All right,
there.
perfect. Thought maybe her dog was attacking her. or something. Anybody else want to put theirs in?
There's not a bad one in the bunch. They're all
All right, we
all are from good to,
Yep.
to very good.
I agree. We got Kent Mace is in. We got the
Okay.
Legend. He's in. You sent me Jay's, correct?
Me? No, I sent you Blake's.
Blake's, I'm sorry. So we still have,
I am prepared to be surprised.
all right, we have Jay still needs his in. And Justine, if she's going to submit. And I think that's about everybody.
Got from all three Maces?
I've got Nate directly, I've got Kent directly, and I've got, no, I do not. Oh, now I do. I have all
Okay.
3 Maces now. I have
3
Justine now.
Okay.
And then Jay says he has no idea. It's going to be a pleasant surprise.
He just wants to be surprised.
That's fine. I'm good with
There's
that.
nothing wrong with that. There's nothing
I'm
wrong with that.
Every time I taste it, I completely change my mind.
Right.
Oh, I know this one. I've definitely had this one before. And then I taste it again and like, nope, that must be an old one. I've never had that before. So
All right. So, Steve, what we typically do with these is we typically do a vote on what everyone thought was their favorite, no matter what
Okay.
they thought it was.
Okay.
So I think we should do that just so we can, I always like having a champion. So we'll go around. I'll start with the top of my screen and Steve will tally. And all we're doing is everyone's going to give us what their favorite single offering was and what letter that was, A, B, C, D, or E. So Legend, we're going to start with you. What was your favorite?
I'm going to say C.
C. All right. We got one for C. Steve, looks like you're next.
I also said C.
C it is. Papa Mace.
I said D.
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 All right.
Okay.
Fruitcake.
Fruitcake. Nate Mace.
All right, I'm about to do a lot of hedging, but I'll give you an answer.
I like this.
I like the nose on A the best out of all of them.
Okay.
I think C I would like the most if it were to like have more time to breathe, because it still had some of that funk, which I'm not a huge fan of. But I think if it didn't have that, I would like that the most. But my answer, I think, is going to be D.
I like it.
He covered 60% of their offerings
You know,
today.
You're a winner no matter what.
D, I think was my favorite, but the only problem I had with it is it just didn't have as much flavor as some of the others. But I think it's the flavor that it did have was my favorite. So
Okay.
there you go. Lots of hedging, I told you. But
Yeah, that's good. Oh,
And B and E by far had the best color.
okay.
Right. Let's see. Jay, you're next. Which one was your favorite?
I'll hedge just a little bit. I
Okay.
thought I was going to say C, and then I kept going back to A. So
Okay.
I think A is my preference. It had the most going on for me, and C is probably a close second.
Okay.
All right. Justine, what is your favorite?
I'm gonna go with A as well.
A.
A.
Okay.
Okay.
Nick.
I will also say A with C a close second.
Okay.
Okay.
And then Blake.
It was between C and D. Well, I think D edged out just by a nose.
Okay.
Did you say D?
D. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That's it, Wes? That got everybody?
That's it. That's correct.
So here's where we're at. B and E got no votes. So they're not in the mix here.
Okay.
C is in third place, but tied first place is A and D, both with 3 votes. Both with
A
3
and
votes.
D.
A and D, yes.
Okay. All right. So we have everyone's favorites. It looks like I've got everyone who wanted to do their guesses of which is which. So I think the easiest way for me to do it is reveal it. You guys keep your own scores
Okay.
and see how accurate everyone is. So by default, number 1 is a Dusty. Does anyone care to guess which of the Dusties, I'm sorry, A is a Dusty. Does anyone care to guess which one it was, the Old Charter or the Sunnybrook?
Sunbrook.
Okay,
I had it as Sunnybrook.
Sunnybrook.
That's
Anybody
what I
else?
would guess too. It just seemed older than
Okay.
the other one that I guessed was a Dusty. It felt older to me. So I'm going to say that's Sunnybrook, but I don't actually know. But
Okay, you're all wrong. It's the Old Charter.
Yeah.
And
You're part. I'm
Dusty.
sorry. Yeah, it's a Dusty for sure. You were right about that.
Dusty, yes.
Yeah, A was a Dusty. It was the Old Charter.
Okay. I got
All
that right. I got A right.
All right,
On
you're
the-
1
on
for
the-
1.
on the guess. I'm 1 for 1.
Anybody that had a Dusty or Old Charter is 1 and 0.
Okay.
B, does anyone want to guess what B was?
I guess it was the Babe.
Okay.
I guessed Beam as well.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah. Beam white.
Beam white. Anybody else? All beam whites? All right. I will say that in looking through the guesses, there is one person who guessed B correctly. And
One person?
that is Justine.
Wow.
It is Basil Hayden, which is a Beam product, but it is Basil Hayden.
Basil Hayden's. Wow.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. C is in Charlie. Does anyone want to guess what C is in Charlie is?
We had Dusty.
That's the other
Okay.
Dusty. That's a Sunny.
Dusty. I'm looking down the list to see.
No.
We've got quite a few Dusties for C. We have a Basil Hayden, which we know is wrong. We have a vote for Four Roses for C. But the majority is correct. This is the Sunnybrook Dusty. This is C.
Okay.
All right. So that leaves 2. This should be pretty easy, but
I was 100% confident in the next one. Four Roses.
Okay.
Four
Four
Roses. It had the spice. That's what I always say about the Four Roses. I'd be floored if this one isn't Four Roses, but I've been wrong before. But
anybody else agree with Four Roses, or anybody else have a different opinion? It looks like for most of the voting, it's fairly unanimous that D was Four Roses. A couple of Basil Haydens in there, which we know is wrong. It's Four Roses, which means E as in Edward is the Jim Beam white.
Jim Beam. Okay.
So what's interesting about this is the Dusties prevailed. It doesn't always happen in these Dusty events, but in this time it did. They tied for, actually one was 1 and one was 3, but the Four Roses performed very well. It was second in the most popular voting, and most everyone guessed the Four Roses correct in the lineup. Once they
I
had it.
feel somewhat of a victory there, Wes, because if you go back and listen to the shows, I've always said Four Roses 80 proof is the best 80 proof bourbon
absolutely.
on the market. And
Yeah.
this is reflective of that. It is
Empirical
one that you can
data.
sip. Yeah, most of 80 proofs aren't sippers. They are cocktail based, I feel. And some of them can be at 80 proof so weak they get lost in cocktails. I say that Four Roses is good for either one. That spice that I was talking about comes through in a cocktail, and it's okay to sip too. So I think that Four Roses is the world's best 80 proof bourbon, and this in a mini group here kind of confirms that. So
Yeah, it was my third favorite, but it was a close second to the Old Charter to me.
now we have to hear. Now we know Justine's the only one who got Basil Hayden's right for B. Did she get the entire thing right? Did she get 100 on the quiz?
Yeah, she did not get the entire thing right. She had the beam correct. She had the Basil Hayden's correct. She had Dusty as A correct, but she had Four Roses and a Dusty mixed on C and D. But basically,
Gotcha.
probably her, yourself. There was no one with a perfect score. Most everyone had.
Once you miss one, you got to miss two because you got to
yeah, exactly. So most everyone had three of some sort of iteration, but the one consistent guess was A being no one guessed A being anything other than a Dusty.
Kind of cool.
And no one guessed anything but the last one being Beam.
Okay.
So the bookends were pretty consistent. The three pieces of meat in the middle were flopped around a little bit.
Yeah.
But overall, everyone did a really good job. It's clear that the group has a good understanding of kind of what notes that they typically. I think a lot of people on the event tonight have been through a lot of these, and some have been through every one of these Dusty events so far. And they're starting to kind of pick out some of those flavors and those nuances of what's in a Dusty. So even if you don't know exactly, you can pretty well pick out a couple of notes that say, I don't know for sure what's going on, but that one's drastically different than what I drink on a day-to-day basis. It's got to be the Dusty. So
yeah, I think we can. That's a key takeaway here, that 80 proof is different. 20 plus years ago than what it is today. So yeah, it's a totally different thing. You can, I mean, color. It had older whiskey in it too. I mean, that's certainly part of it.
I mean, there's Dusty 80 and 86 proofs that drink like bottled and bond and look like 12-year, 105 proof as far as color. Like it's just a different process. And there's so many different factors, all the way from what they go into the barrel from a proof standpoint to obviously the wood back in those days and how they conditioned the wood and what char. I mean, there's just so many different factors and variables, but
yeah,
there's a distinct difference in Dusty whiskey versus today. It doesn't mean it's always better. There are some that are not better, but in some ways, a lot of them are significantly better.
Yeah, and I think it all comes down to that heritage brands, the old brands. It needs to be older. The everything that they do, the corners that they cut along the way means it has to be in the barrel longer to give it a good flavor. The Dusties were in the barrel longer. There was a whiskey glut that meant that they might use for a 4-year-old age stated product. There might be, a barrel of that in there, and then the rest of it is all 10-year plus, age stated. So that's how you look at that Old Crow Chessman. I wonder how old that really was. I mean, I know it's age stated 10-year. But I bet you most of that stuff was the 20 years old.
Yeah, the reason that a lot of the Dusties are so complex and have so much flavor and are so dark is, especially from the 60s into the 90s, where you had the whiskey glut era. The age statements and the age statement rule has always been the age statement just has to match the youngest whiskey in the batch. If it's a batch, which there weren't single barrels until, was it 91, 93 with Blanton's, or 84, I'm sorry, with Blanton's. So until then it was all batch, small batch, large batch, medium batch. It doesn't matter. So yeah, you can, it's that Old Crow Chessman is 10-year age stated. It looks like motor oil.
Yeah,
and not in a bad way. Like it's as dark and rich looking. It's got a lot of people think it's the best bourbon they've ever had. For me, it's top 5. It's not the best I've ever sampled. I've been lucky enough to sample some really good Stitzel-Weller stuff, which I think is probably cream of the crop. But it is it's not just 10-year. I mean, there's got to be and even the flavors you get, you start to get a lot of oak. And a lot of those flavors you get with well-aged bourbon on that Chessman to go with some of the sweet caramel and spice. So I think you're right, Steve. It's probably a combination. Rumor is it's a combination of 10 to 16 year.
Yeah. Yeah. At least, I mean, yeah, there's probably some older than that.
Oh,
so.
I would say there's, and they're it's not single barrel, but each decanter I've sampled out of 2 or 3 different decanters from people that's owned them in bars and so forth. And they're not single barrels, but decanter to decanter are not the same. So that leads you to believe that the different batches, I think, vary along that 10 to 20 year age statement mix in there. I don't think all batches are equal, for lack of better terms. And that's probably pretty common for a lot of that whiskey glut era whiskey. I mean, there's some, we talked about Beam and how the current Beam products performed in the tasting tonight, but I can tell you that I've got a bottle of 1968, came from a decanter of 68 Bottle and Bomb Beam. And if I blind tasted that with anybody here, it'd be hard pressed for anybody to believe that was a Beam product. No offense to Beam, because they make good product, but it is not. When you think, if I told you this is a Dusty, it's from 1968, and I told you had 5 guesses of what brand it came from, you may get lucky and say Beam, but more than likely you're never going to say Beam. It's just that different, and that proof point and that age. It's just it's a different time and a different way of doing whiskey.
Yeah.
The funny thing, guys, after I know what they are, I went back, tasted all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Which now, of course, they all taste. Oh yeah, that's basically
right. Of course, yes.
But now, if you were to ask me which one I like the best, I'm ending up with E. Jim.
You've had too much to drink, sir. No, I mean, there was nothing wrong with E. Like Jim Beam White Label kind of gets in the whiskey enthusiast community. It gets a little bit of a bad rap, and
there's nothing wrong with it.
People make comments about it and so forth. It's a mixer only, and you can never sip it. But we just sat here and sipped it. And we sipped it against 4 other 80 proof competitors, and it was not the drastic 5th place. But it was in 5th place, but that doesn't mean it wasn't enjoyable. I drank the entire pour I had.
Yeah.
For the money, it's good stuff.
Oh yeah.
I agree. And to Kent's point and to Wes's point, I was a Beam drinker. That was my entree. Beam White Label is what I drank in college, but I got away from it, and I thought I just really evolved past it. And as I look back, I thought that was just cheap bourbon that I could afford at the time when I was in college. But as we've gotten into these events, we have done where we've gone back, because we've done Dusty decanters of Beam, and then you try what today, and I've been pleasantly surprised that it is a solid product. So they're for the money, for what they do, for the size, the amount of volume they got to put out, it's a pretty darn good product for them.
They're number one for a reason. So
yeah. We'll wrap this up with a couple things. I want to leave some time for Q&A, but before we get to that, Wes does have another event coming up. It's the only one he's got on the books right now. I know he's got several other things in the works, some pretty cool things in the works, actually. So please follow along on Eventbrite and make sure that you see those as they come out. So including, he's trying to track down some old Maker's Mark, which would be very cool. He's trying to get some Stitzelweller, which would be a cool event as well. The next one he's got on the books is coming up. Date on this one is July 7th. So this will be closing out pretty soon to leave time for shipping in that. But it is 1960s Canadian Club. So getting out of the bourbon world into Canadian Club. But this is 60s. So we're going to try 1960s Canadian Club versus that of today. About a 50-year difference. And does the impact? It's a pretty cheap one, $35. So it'll get you 2 samples and Canadian Club of today versus the 60s. I'll be interesting. I'm not a huge fan. I mean, I've drank Canadian Club as probably that college era. So I'd like to go back and see what it was, 30 years before, my college years, and see what it tasted like. So should be a fun.
We'll learn a little Hiram Walker Canadian distillery history while we're doing it too, which would be kind of cool.
Yeah. Which is a cool historic company and a lot of history there. So it should be cool. So sign up for that. That is July 7th, and then keep an eye out for more events coming up.
I got it.
Cool. You're in that one already, Rick?
Oh yeah.
We figured.
Right.
Any questions for Wes before we let the man go here? Any questions about tonight's event? Dusty finding, anything you want to ask him, feel free.
It was fun. I liked this.
No, this is great. Wes, they're all great.
I appreciate
That's
it. I appreciate everybody that joins on. We've got kind of a core group that's on pretty much all of the Dusty events. And if they're not, it's a scheduling issue of some sort.
Right.
So I appreciate everyone that's been on 1 or 100 of these events. We haven't had 100, but you know what I mean?
We're working towards that. Yes.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things where people are a little leery of Dusties because they hear this, they just hear people say, oh, Dusty Funk, and they think it's like, it's just, they're used to their, what I can go off the shelf and grab. But I think once people get a combination of tasting something that can't be reproduced and also learning the history behind it, it becomes just kind of a cool, refreshing thing to do in the bourbon industry. I mean, we all follow latest releases and all the upcoming, picks and everything that's going on in the bourbon industry today. But it's nice to step back and just kind of drink a little history and kind of learn about some of the previous brands and so forth. So if you guys can help spread the word, I appreciate it. My goal is to get to a point where we sell these things out as quickly as possible, and we can grow this thing and kind of share some Dusty history with everyone. We can really get into some pretty crazy Dusties along the way that you have a hard time finding them anywhere. Bars, places like that. You go down to Bourbon, to Justin's House of Bourbon, or Jack Rose or somewhere like that. You can go to the bar and you can order a 1970s old granddad, and for $80 a pour, and just listen to the bartender tell you some BS story. But it's a little different when you get online with friends and tell some of the history and interact and so forth. So that's what I like doing it.
Wes, Wes, tonight the history was great. I loved it. You always had history, but you had a lot tonight.
Those are and it's all about whatever we're drinking in the brand. There's the bourbon history is a lot verbal and part BS and part lies and stories and everything else. So these two, part of the reason I chose these two is I knew they would be good pours, and more importantly, I knew they would have some good, interesting history. A lot of it I already knew, but I learned. The main reason I like doing it is I learn a lot just researching to give the history to you guys. So I get a lot of enjoyment out of that myself.
It was about a year ago at Bourbon Club. I was telling somebody, they said, when did you first start drinking bourbon? They said, probably pre-high school, when I was thinking for my dad. But, when I was late high school, early college, I said I drank C&G.
Oh, yeah. Chapin and Gore.
Chapin and Gore.
Yeah.
And, as we used to affectionately call it coughing gag. But at the end of the night, I'm getting ready to leave, and one of the guys said, "Hey, aren't you going to take that bottle with you?" And I look over in a bar, and here's a bottle of C&G. I go, "That's not mine." "Oh, Mike left that for you because he heard your story about."
Oh, nice.
I said, "Really? Yeah, take it with you." And so it's like, never thought this stuff. I'd run across the stuff I drank in late high school or early college.
Well, I've seen a handful of those bottles out there, and it's one of those that I haven't dug a lot into, but I have a feeling it's got a pretty cool, rich history that not a lot of people know about. So it's on my list. If I can find one, I'm going to offer it as an event and dig into the history and share it. I know it'll be something you'll be interested in for sure.
Oh, yeah, this was about half or 3/4 of a bottle of it. So like cool,
Yeah, that's definitely one on my list. I've got a hit list of about 25 or 30 that
I think there's some St. Louis connection to C&G. So
yeah, I think it is too. Yeah, so that whole thing's going to be.
That'll be my favorite event ever. So talk St. Louis. I'll be on the Arch grounds during that one. I'll be live remote from there. Yes.
I was looking a while ago. I was looking at the pictures as Wes was talking about all the old charter bottles, but I found a Robert E. Lee, and it was distilled in St. Louis. A Robert E. Lee whiskey. It's not a bourbon.
Really?
So, Wes, if you can find a Robert E. Lee Old Dusty.
Robert E. Lee,
huh? Wow.
I know there was, I know Heaven Hill used to do a brand, Colonel Lee, but I've not seen a Robert E. Lee.
Robert E. Lee.
All right, I got it written down. I'll take a look at it.
I'll find the picture and I'll text it to you.
Yeah. Wes had one, and he should have done it for one of these events. And you would have liked this, Kent. He had a Jesse James one. That would have been perfect for one of these.
So the cool thing about that is the Jesse was spelled like a girl's name. It was a IE,
Uh-huh.
Oh, really?
JESSIE, and it was for export market only.
Huh.
And I'm guessing what happened was, I didn't really dig into it. I'm guessing that they ran into probably
Legal
some
for it,
trademark or something, and they said, well, let's just throw an I in there and we'll fool all the foreigners. They don't know shit. So they just threw it overseas, and it was Jesse James.
And it was probably bad, but it would have been fun to try just because it's Jesse James, obviously, Missouri. He's got a lot of history around in these parts. So yeah. So, but he's also got plenty of Kentucky history too. So I thought you would like that. Supposedly, Jesse's brother surrendered to a relative of the Samuels family. So
really,
yeah,
for some reason I can believe that.
That's true.
TW was the sheriff.
Yeah.
Jesse James,
and it was family to them. So he was able to get exonerated. Let him. He basically went into a friendly part and got himself off by going to family versus getting captured out by anyone else. So
the Jesse James gang robbed a bank in my little small hometown in
really?
Kentucky, Russellville. And the bank's still there. It's actually a historic site. And in Kentucky, every town has a festival of whatever. Usually it's a festival of whatever crop they're famous for. It's a wheat festival, a cherry festival, strawberry. Ours is tobacco. It's tobacco growing country. And so every year at the tobacco festival, they do a reenactment with these guys dressed up like the James gang, and they do the whole reenactment there at the historic bank site. Yeah, in a small town, it's a big ordeal, but it's interesting when people say Jesse James. I'm like, oh yeah, for some odd reason he must have been passing through to bigger and better places and said, "Here's a podunk town. Let's rob their bank and get on with life."
Yeah, probably easy. Yeah.
If the reenactment is accurate and true, they shot the bank manager out on the front lawn, kind of thing, all that jazz.
Yeah.
The locals like it.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, we thank you guys for coming out. I want to give a big round of applause to our man, Mr. Wes Hardin here. Great job tonight, as always.
Thanks, everyone.
And appreciate that. With that, I'll turn off the recorder, and I'll stick around if you have any questions or anything like that before we wrap it up. But I want to say goodbye to our audience that'll be watching this as on the recording. Thanks, everyone.
All right. So if you